Hey guys, so I want to read the letter for independence that Canada sent to the Queen of England. And I've never read it before, but I've heard about it. Very little. But I've heard that she liked it and Canada was given independence. Um, the reason I want to do this is because I want to know what happens to the future of Canada. Now, we know what happens to the future of America. It gets locked down, it has all this other stuff. But I think in Canada's case, I'm presuming that Canada will be more aligned to the United Kingdom slash Europe in the future, which gives the ability for American states to align with Canada so they're not isolated from the world. So I'm going to read something here. It was something I wrote before we get to the letter. So I'm going to read this verbatim. Take notice if you want. So it says this. I'm going to need to read the Canada's letter for independence to determine what happens to Canada in the future. I haven't read it yet, but I presume that the United States of America is a prophetic virtue. What I mean is determined by the language used in that letter. Can a person read it and as soon as they look at it, can they see that they can be aligned with the United Kingdom again? And from there, that, what we call states of America, the United States of America, the states that make up America today, they can align with Canada's alignment, bypassing the ocean restrictions. I'm referring to Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, where it was separated by two oceans. So that would make the United States of America a collection of a few states that came together to oppose this, which is, like I said, a prophetic virtue of nature of what those states represent. A sanctuary from the outside world, a strong knit community. Which means that the bordering states of Canada would be the first to be adapted into Canada. That would be like Washington State. What else is up there? I don't really know. I really don't remember my states. I'm sure that Canada would be involved. But I think that the lower, like less than lower than half, like Arizona, New Mexico, all of them, not Texas. Texas would be independent. But states like Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, states like that, they would be more geared towards going against Canada. They would be these states would come together and be their own United States of America, so to speak. It says the United States under that loses everything. Everything underneath those states that are bordering Canada. And I said, and it makes sense because the United States, when it falls and dissolves, there's going to be many states that can't survive without a federal government. Those would be, like I mentioned before, those would be your states like along the Rocky Mountains. Which, doesn't Nevada count for that? Well, actually, I want to be the Rocky Mountains because I think the Rocky Mountains are part of that area. I didn't think about that. But, yeah, everything on the outside of that, part of like the Louisiana Purchase, wasn't that the Rocky Mountains? I don't remember. But anything on the west side of that, like anything like Colorado. Where are the Rocky Mountains at, guys? Hang on, I gotta Google that. Okay, so the Rocky Mountains are Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Utah, and New Mexico. So it's not Nevada. What states would the Louisiana Purchase? Louisiana purchased 15 present states: Arkansas, Colorado, eastern portion, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Minnesota, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Wyoming. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Those states would be aligned with Canada. Yeah, those are perfect. Yeah, they're on the western, on the yeah, they're on the eastern side. If I said west, I didn't mean to say west earlier. Everything on the eastern side would be more aligned with Canada. The stuff on the eastern side would be more aligned with those, New Mexico. That would be the more United States of America. Yeah, it says here states with small territorial slivers within a purchase: New Mexico and Texas. New Mexico, we've talked about that. Texas will be its own sovereign country at this point, and it's only, like I said, it's only a sliver. So, Texas can't handle its own. So let's go back and see where I left off here. So everything in the United States lose everything. That would be mainly those New Mexico, Nevada, and all of them. They lose everything. But California, unless Nevada sides with Canada, they could maybe half of it. I don't know, but California definitely. Yeah, you only get a few states. New Mexico, like I said, Nevada, Colorado, maybe split, same as Nevada. Um, yeah, you have like maybe 3 or 4 states, maybe five at most, in that area that would be wanting to be these isolationist United States of America. Anyways, let's continue reading. It says, I'd allow it because people who wouldn't agree with it would be separate from the two sides. The divide is going to be so straight that you're either going to want to be on the side of Europe, want to be on that side, see everything, or you want to be isolated from all that and have your own community over here in these few states. Wait, did I skip that? Hang on. I skipped that sentence. Okay, because after that says can't survive without the federal government. Then we talked about Louisiana Purchase and all that. Then I said they want to be part of the outside world before they knew what was going on. So it gives those people an opportunity. I said, I suspect that the states making up United States of America would be desert. A lot of desert in New Mexico, Arizona too, um, Nevada, all that is desert area. And I said, very symbolic for being lifeless and dry and clueless to any outside environment. People say, what do they have in America? And people would say, well, mostly desert. And I said, how the mighty have fallen, and Canada adopts these states when Trump said United States would adopt Canada. Now take notes here, guys. I said, but that's BS on my part because it's always been this way. United States of America was the place you go to, you happen to hear about and come across. Immigration. That's a big thing. True for Canada as well, but mainly the United States is known for this. I said, it wasn't anything to the global world in people's minds until World War II. And then it focused on public perception of its own people to make them believe it's something it's not. I said, America has always tried to wedge its way into the global world in order to mean something to the outside world. Like they try to put these loans and all the money to give them money, see an opportunity to whatever it was for. It led to the Great Depression. It was a total failure. People can debate whether it was a total failure or not, but it led to the Great Depression all over the world. You could say that people have debated if America was a huge part of that, or if it was the main cause of that, but it was really, it played a role in it, definitely. More than just a little bit. I said, until everyone on the outside started collaborating without using war, and America had no more leverage. And war is the only language America seems to know when the outside world disagrees with it. Like Iran. Europe isn't having wars in Iran. You know, they're not coming to side with America to go with Iran, even though you have Muslims and they could be destroying churches in Europe. Definitely happening in Sweden. And all these other things that you know Sweden has a problem with Muslims. There's an onslaught coming through in there just for immigration or migration purposes. But no one else is siding with America on this. So it seems as if America just wants to be something it's not. It's trying to mean something to the outside world. I said I wouldn't give America a dime for bad talking about it, because if I can see this, then the generation I was born in can make the same conclusion with those same deductions. Outside of political parties, you know, you know, of course, my family were immigrants. Mostly my mom's side, they were from Italy, Sicily, in fact, and that was what 6 generations ago or so when that happened. And if I can see it today in my generation, I can make that conclusion and I can use the information available to me. America, I just can't get down with what America is doing. I just can't. And it's always been this way, right? So, but right now as it stands, it doesn't. But let's continue to read. It said, and for that reason I can't support America, because it doesn't make sense in the world we live in today. And that divide is only going to increase until all that's left with America is a few states that disagrees with what everyone else says. And I said, I can't get down with that. It just goes hand in hand with what I just said. This was really, when I was writing this, it just came out. I wasn't really just thinking about it. It just came out, and I think it's a beautiful thing reading this. And then I say this. Bunch of delusional idiots Trump supporters are. Oops. That's supposed to be say supporters, not supports. I mean, you could say they're supports. I'll let it slide. People can watch this video and know what I'm talking about if there's a problem. I said, they did it to themselves. I said, why would Europe and Canada do that? Because they want nothing to do with America. It doesn't matter who's in charge of the country. It has bad blood generationally. It's poison to the global world and it's correcting itself. And I said, America's got 6 years. But I do the analysis on that letter to see if this is viable. Otherwise, it suffers the same problem America has. Separated by 2 oceans and little outside influence from Europe. So, it all comes down to what that letter says. And I'm not sure if I can get the full one. I don't know if I can get a copy of it or rewarded version of it. I don't know what it looks like, guys. All I'm trying to get is the language, and that's all I need. What was the letter? I said, what was the letter sent to the Queen of England for independence? Oh. Sent from Canada. Not the Declaration of Independence. That's totally different. So, the Proclamation of the Constitution Act, 1980. No. Oh, so this was in 1982. I thought this was way back in the day. So Canada didn't get independence from the British until 1980s. I didn't know that. I did not know that. I thought this was like after the United States got independence. I mean, I thought it was after, but I didn't think it was that late. That's 200 years later. Um, so the Proclamation of the Constitution Act, 1982, signed by Queen Elizabeth II on April 17th, 1982, was the official document that brought full independence to Canada. It gave Canada the power to amend its constitution without British approval, while still recognizing the monarch as Canada's head of state. So, when you say the monarch, um, we're talking about the British monarch is still the head of state of Canada. So that would mean that okay, trying not to get ahead of myself over here, but based on what I just read, there is a relationship between Canada and United Kingdom. All right, that works. Um, I figured there. I didn't know it was like that, but if there is that, um, so the prime minister is a representation of is like a president, but he's not really in charge. I guess you could say. Reading based on this, wasn't Canada? I don't know much about Canada, but wasn't Canada, or is it still a colony? Like the entire country, isn't it a colony of what you would call the British Empire? Okay, so let's read this. In 1867, the British North American Act united the colonies into the Dominion of Canada. Though the country was still a colony and its constitution remained under control of the British Parliament. 1931 Statute of Westminster granted Canada legislative autonomy and legal freedom. However, the power to change the amended constitution still officially remained with the British Parliament. Alright, I see a theme here. 1982 Patriation of the Constitution, the process of bringing the Constitution under complete Canadian control. During the ceremony of Parliament here in Ottawa, the Queen signed the Royal Proclamation officially severing the country's final colonial ties to the UK. Okay, that was 1982. So is that part of this? So my question is, do they still have a monarchy over Canada? I mean, it doesn't change anything as long as you have that influence in the United Kingdom. Okay, so it says Canada adopted its own constitution and became a fully independent country in 1982. A bill was passed by the Canadian government renaming Dominion Day as Canada Day in the same year. It was in 1867 Canada gained independence from Great Britain. Okay, you're going to have to define what independence means in this case, because I'm getting two different. It's an independent country in 1982, but in 1867 Canada gained independence from Great Britain. I'm not entirely sure what those two differences are. That'll be interesting to tell what flip side of independence does that mean. I'm sure that if Americans knew that, they could tell the difference between independence between two different factions, I guess you could say. Okay. I think that's very interesting. Should I write that in my notes? I gotta make a note of that. Let me copy and paste this because I think that would make a good video sometime. Alright, let's see. Canada is completely independent politically but remains tied to the British monarchy. As King Charles III serves as Canada's official head of state. Alright, so he's the you could say he's the king of Canada, but the Prime Minister represents, I'm assuming, he represents democracy in Canada. So they have the power over that in not letting. Alright. I can actually see this working. I can, because that's how it's going to be in Ukraine in the future. You have the state, you won't have a president, but you have the state. In that case, the head of state, okay, this is a lot. King Charles III, so he serves as the head of state. Head of state is a term used when you're overseeing everything. But you don't have, it's like the highest leader of a country. Ukraine will have this too, but it's different because you have someone above the head of state. The head of state, the state would be Ukraine's security service. Their Security Bureau of Ukraine, the SBU. So, and above that would be a king would oversee them, and they would be in charge there. But it's the state itself. They won't have democracy, but they would see what's going on, and they would. I'm sure they would listen to the population to see what's going on. But they would be aligned to the person they would. Yeah, the United States wishes it has that, but it doesn't. But anyways, you have the SVU and you have a guy above them that represents them and they represent him. So they coincide. Then you have the state also representing the people. And you don't have an ideology or a democracy acting as the middle ground. It's a mutual agreement. Much with Canada and its people and its understanding of the king. But I don't think that the King Charles III serves as any figure that can control Canada's government or anything like that, or the security agency. I think it's called the CIS. I think it's the Canadian Intelligence Service. I think that's what it's called. But yeah, the King Charles III does not have any control of the CIS. It would be its own independent thing. So this speaks to me. So it says here, Canada's evolution to full autonomy means that the British Parliament has zero authority over Canadian governance, and only Canadian ministers can advise the Canadian monarch. Okay. Now, my question is, it's tied to the British monarchy, but does that mean that the Canadian monarch is King Charles III, or is that some other guy? I can't really tell. Is that like, no one can talk to the King Charles III unless it goes through the Canadian ministers? Is that how that works? I don't know what. So is the Canadian King Charles III the Canadian monarch? I mean, feel free to post this in the comments. I'm sure that if I just answered it, then people would have to watch the entire video to go to the ending to find out what that is. But if you have it in the comments, I'm sure that many people would find that more beneficial to understand than me just making a video like this. So post in the comments if you know. The connection acts as a symbolic constitutional framework rather than a political one. Okay, so it's not a republic. Okay, that makes sense. Because a republic would be separate and have its own autonomy, like the United States of America. That's interesting too, because when you have those few states left over, the United States of America is not a is not a republic because it's a collection of like the Louisiana Purchase. It's separated, but that was only because it was bought out. It wasn't because it was a rule or anything like that. That was from the United States government. So the United States of America, as it stands today, is not a republic. Right? It wouldn't be a democratic republic. Virginia and Maryland would be because they were colonies. But the United States as a whole would not be a republic. That's a good point. That's a good point. Because if Canada was a colony of the United Kingdom. So it says here, because Canada is a constitutional monarchy and legal move to separate and become a republic would require the unanimous consent of the federal parliament and all 10 provincial legislative assemblies, making it a very complex and lengthy. So Canada is not a republic because it hasn't separated from the British monarchy. That makes sense. So yeah, United States of America would not be a democratic republic until this all takes place, and then Canada would still be under the rule, but now states would be going towards siding with Canada and Europe, and then you have the few states that do become a republic because they're no longer part of the government they used to be part of. Yeah. That makes sense. So this all goes together. I didn't know any of this, but this is why I do these videos so we can learn this stuff. Oops, didn't mean to click that. So yeah, the only question I have asked, and you guys can post this in the comments because I won't Google it. Is the Canada's head of state the same person as the Canadian monarch? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know. So, yeah, I see this working. I can see how this is all coming together. And, yeah, it does poke holes in the United States. It definitely does. Oh, I thought it was insofar. I was wondering where did my ChatGPT go, but here it is. I thought this was AI, or that AI does it. I thought this was part of it, but no, I'm in Atlas here, ChatGPT. There needs to be like some sort of window over here or something that can signify that you're in ChatGPT, so you can separate the two. That'd be nice to have. Some sort of border that goes around these edges that glows or something. Yeah. Wait, let me turn that off and let me go back to what I accidentally closed the tab. Or were we even discussing anything? What was that? What was that first thing I was talking about? Oh, the letter. I completely forgot, guys. I was so busy reading other stuff, I forgot about the letter. Sent from Canada to of England. I meant to do that in Google. It was for independence. I really don't know how biased JetPT is going to be on this one. 1981. It was the former request asking Queen to have the UK Parliament pass what became the Canada Act 1982, allowing Canada to patriate its constitution. The address said in part, "Most gracious sovereign, we your majesty's loyal subjects, the Senate and House of Commons of Canada and Parliament assembled, humbly approach your majesty, praying that you may graciously be pleased to cause a bill to be laid before the Parliament of the United Kingdom." Yeah, I don't even think I have to read this letter, guys. I think we can just already conclude that they do have a relationship with Europe. I'm already convinced by that, even outside this letter. The letter was the only thing I knew about. But even beyond that, I can definitely see that you guys are, yeah, totally, 100%. It says the key idea was essentially, please have the UK Parliament pass this act so that Canada can thereafter amend its own constitution without needing the UK. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I'm curious, what... I want to know something. Just really quickly. The answer is probably no, but I just wanted to know what day... What day was Palm Sunday in 1982? April 4th. What day was April 4th? What day was Passover in 1982? Wednesday, April 7th. And then on Thursday, April 15th. Passover commemorates the Exodus of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. You could call them the Israelites in Egypt. I have made this beyond, like, I didn't know the date, I didn't know anything, but I do know that uh, Egypt and Israel are very close tied together because of Calgary. Calgary is the hailstorm capital of um, of Canada, and Egypt, they had, I forget what happened, but it was in I think it's in the Old Testament where it talks about something like something falls from the sky, and then Egypt, I forget the details. Egypt, and there was some other country involved as well. I forget, but I know that I used that comparison for Canada involving the hailstorms and stuff coming down to separate itself. So, something like that. I forget. It's in my notes somewhere. I'd have to go look. It talks about. I may add that to my notes too. Yeah, it's been like 2 or 3. I think it's been more like 3 years since I've wrote that. But anyways, guys, yeah, I would say, yeah, Canada definitely has still a relationship with Europe. There is influence going through Europe, and yeah, that's salvation, I guess you could say, for the people who left the United States the coming years. And this is going to happen within 6 years. This seems like something that would only happen like incrementally, right? But all the stuff that's happening today, it's pushing us into that direction where yeah, United States becomes just a label of these few states that still want those American values and they should represent. But it's all a delusion. I mean, a majority of people would not agree with that. You know, so yeah, they're all gonna side with Europe. There's gonna be some states that go with Canada. I'm sure that Washington, California, um, maybe Wyoming. You know, top states of the United States bordering Canada, and then you'd have some that remain neutral and they not too extreme for either side, but they can understand it. I see those too, but yeah, yeah, I just see that makes a lot of sense, really. Yeah, I didn't think about that. United States of America being a republic because it can't be a republic because yeah, um, states were from everywhere else. Yeah, sure, they were republics, but they were bought out. They wasn't like, but it goes to the United States where it claims itself to be a republic when it's not a republic because Washington D.C. is a republic. It's a well, it can't be a republic because it didn't. It wasn't part of anything. It was created by seizing land from Virginia and Maryland. Now, Virginia and Maryland are republics because they were part of United Kingdom. Or maybe was it the United Kingdom back then? I think it was England. Anyways, guys, you know what I'm saying. So yeah, yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I wonder what ChatGPT would say if we were really a democratic republic besides just agreeing with the label. Yeah, I know that's gonna say yeah, yeah. We we can already know what it's gonna say there. It's gonna protect everything. Anyways, guys, I'll end it here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.